There we go. Okay.
Go.
Hello, this is Carl Seidel and the People's View. I'd like to say a few words about our expansion now. We have 2 shows during each week. One show deals with a lot of legislative issues, both on the state and on the city level. And we have our interviews like we're doing today. We have Howard Kaufman and Doris Hohenze, both on the Board of Education. Welcome aboard. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Tell us a little bit about the things that have been happening and making the newspaper, and we got a list of things that we can review, starting with the strategic plan that the superintendent said he put into action at the beginning of the year.
So, well, the strategic plan, there hasn't been one in many years. I think the last one was, what, 13 or 14?
Before we got on.
Before we ever got on the board.
Yeah.
And for the first 2 years that we were on, there was always talk about we wanting to do it, but no one wanted to start it until we got the new super. So when Dr. Mosley came on board, he actually brought that up in his interviews, that I noticed you don't have a strategic plan. So we were very optimistic. I think that's one of the reasons why we voted him in. At least that was a contributing factor for me. But what has since happened, once the new members came on the board, within 3 months of their election, everything started with the strategic plan, but the board voted away its own participation.
Really?
Yeah, the board just gave it away. This is amazing. What they did was the one member on this board member that's on the strategic planning steering committee is Ms. Porter. Now, Ms. Porter was the person who was elected in March to replace Mr. Hollowell.
Right.
So she had the least amount of experience on the board that they put on the strategic planning committee, because she was elected in March and she started it March or April.
None of the people who have been there with a few years of experience.
No.
No, or it's considering like maybe Ms. Van Twyver or even Mr. Mosier, who've been around a long time. Dottie Oden has been around a long time. No, the board just gave up its own participation in that.
We were supposed to have a meeting with the alderman, and the alderman couldn't make it, so we've never rescheduled that.
A focus group with the alderman.
Right.
That was in December. That meeting still hasn't been rescheduled. The thing that bothers me, they've done focus groups. I attended one, and it was for the middle school. So all 3 middle school parents were intended to be there. There was about 12, 13, I think 15 people from the 3 schools, but it turns out only 2 of the 3 schools were represented. And that constituted the focus group. And I've been pushing, in my mind, if you really want to improve education, who's your customer?
Right.
Your kids.
Right.
The kids in the district are the customer. What do you want in your education?
And the parents who are paying for it.
Well, in my mind, if the kids are lit up and the kids are enthusiastic, parents are enthusiastic, and then it feeds into the teachers. So you really need a bottom-up process. They, to the best of my knowledge, other than including some high school students who really don't care because they're gone.
Yeah.
They're juniors.
They're juniors, but even one more year, it doesn't matter. Whatever they ask for, they'll never see. So there was no attempt to include the young kids either in the elementary level or the middle school. Because if you can get them excited about a strategic plan and they know they have a voice, they're going to make that happen. But we've denied that to the kids. And it's a stack deck. You keep meeting every teacher group, you're always going to get the same information. So you're highly weighting all your responses. And the board is going to get a report. That'll be it.
That'll be it.
Pretty much. And then I'm sure the board will accept it, though. I think it's June. It's due in June. There is a survey out there if people want to participate.
Right. Yeah. I just saw that on the...
Yeah, but it's really, I feel, I'm a project management professional. I have a certification. It's called the PMP. So I get what a strategic plan is supposed to be, what it can be. And all it is a bunch of focus group data.
Right.
They haven't even talked about data analysis. I mean, think of all the data we have on student behavior, which is another topic we can talk, or grading.
We do data-driven decision-making, and when we ask for data, we're stonewalled.
And we can't even discuss the data they they give to us.
So you're saying that the school administration is going to do all this without your input or
Yes.
Analysis?
Well, we asked for
Largely,
behavioral
yeah.
discipline reports.
Yes.
I've learned more listening to a debate at the state level than I did at the board level.
Oh, really?
Yes, because they won't give us the information. We had tests. We wanted the school by school results for the tests. They wouldn't give it to us. They promised to give it to us, but they haven't. We've asked for kindergarten play-based learning. That was approved last year, went into effect in August. What's happened? We don't know. They were supposed to give us a report in October. Here it is, 6 months later. We passed a policy unanimously at a committee 6 months ago. It hasn't made it to the board. Things just disappear.
They just ignore what you're passing. And the board
But
of
rarely we
education-
pass much. I mean, we're in the minority.
Yeah.
Clearly, we have different view of what could be happening in the district and
But
accountability.
even you're saying, though, the attitude is, well, let the superintendent do it?
Yes.
Yeah, the new people in particular, they
trust
really...
and they think it's
Yeah.
collegial to be friendly and to let him lead. We hired
That's not
a leader.
the way you run a business.
Well, they
Well, they
think-
don't understand that it's a $160 million business
That's
that we're
right.
running. They have no clue. They
think
really don't
They've
understand
hired
that.
a leader, let him lead. And
He
then
can
we
lead,
Do what he-
but
do
you
what he
have
asks.
You have to. You're like the board of any kind of board of directors. That's
Well,
what you
we
are.
took an oath to uphold
Right.
the law.
Right.
That's my biggest problem.
Right.
If you don't get information, we
How
can't
can you-
follow the law.
Right.
Like the kindergarten, the play-based learning. Are we doing it? I heard it may take 3 years for us to do it.
One of our the board president, in fact,
She said it'll take 3 years to develop a curriculum. You can pull one down off the department's
Yeah.
website. For our student elections, I had all kinds of problems. I heard from a parent. Kid was denied a ballot. There was electioneering in his classroom, on and on.
misspelled name on the ballot.
So I asked for a copy of the written procedures. State law says you have to have them,
That's right.
or don't hold the elections.
Right.
Has to be open and fair. There's got to be rules. Well, I couldn't get the answer, so I did a right to know, and I still didn't get it, and I had to do another right to know and include the newspapers in to hopefully get it. Meanwhile, the superintendent's telling me it's unwarranted, it's frivolous, it's weaponized against the kids. How is that?
Weaponizing the right to know law is what he said.
It's like, that's my job to find out this information.
Right.
Then he takes a private email from a parent and divulges it to the newspapers. So it's like, give me the information. So
Right.
what it turns out, he never admitted that they don't have rules. He gave me a pile of stuff, but there were no written procedures. So we tried to get the board to encourage the 2 student reps to go back and do that. We put in a motion. They voted it down.
Yeah. The word was empower. I made
Yeah.
a motion to empower our student representatives to
go out and
work with the city or
and
whatever
set
to
up a
set up
draft.
the law,
Yeah.
follow the
Invite the
law.
city
And
clerk.
the board voted against empowering our high school
Have the city
students.
clerk come in and tell them what they do at the real election so they could learn something.
Sure.
So then one night, 9:30 at night, after a budget meeting, I get the police at my door because I took a picture of this letter from a constituent criticizing the superintendent's treatment of that right to know request,
Right.
that specific one. So I posted this on Facebook. Free speech, right?
Yeah.
I get the police at my door.
And what the police do?
Well, they're trying to investigate this. I mean, hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. Political speech is, was I inciting a riot?
Yeah.
They came and took a copy, took my letter, and 2 weeks later I found out that there was no crime.
But what was really weird about that is that the police report itself had redacted names in it, which makes no sense. But to the police department, I know you're around the corner, the next time you redact, clear out your headers because the names of the people who filed and
It
requested
turned
the
out
report
a
are in
board
there.
member conspired with the superintendent who filed the complaint. They decided that my free speech was no,
You didn't have free speech?
Right. So then they called the police
Yeah.
against me. So, I mean, every time I do something, are they going to speak up? I mean, is anybody going to run for school board with
Right.
this type of intimidation?
Doesn't sound like
Well,
that.
so last
I hope
year-
some of you people out there that are listening in here.
So last year, because I
Wanna
checked,
take over.
I went and I checked.
Yeah.
62%, 13 out of our 31 meetings did not have public and Board member comments at the end last
Really?
year under President Dottie.
This is how you stifle
Now
us.
this year we've already had 2 or 3 meetings and we've had no public or board member comment into the new year by our new president.
They
Ms. Reagan.
gavel us. What was it? Was it cursive? You were talking about cursive.
cursive.
And they couldn't possibly do it. There's no way they could do 3 times a week, maybe 20 minutes at, for say grade 3, and do cursive. Because how can you sign your name on a check? How can you decipher the Declaration of Independence? Yeah.
Well, you have the bizarre. The president of the teachers union we were talking to him about it. He says, "Well, I just did a mortgage. I signed it electronically. I don't see a need why our students would want to have to sign their name in the future."
They all
so
know.
what do you want to put an X like it was 150 years ago or 200 years ago when people
Well, how
couldn't
do you
read?
write notes to people? You
They
don't always have
Everything
a typewriter.
But everything is block letters.
We were
It's just not
gavelled
cursive.
you were gavelled for being disrespectful
Always.
because you said, "I think you're making excuses. You could fit this amount of time for cursive into the curriculum." So he was gavelled, silenced, and told that he was disrespectful.
And what we were told was, well, it's not required by the state standards, therefore we don't have to do it. But they'll include things, this fictitious thing called social emotional learning.
Oh, really?
They're embedding that in the curriculum. It's not required by the state.
You got a quick description of what that means?
They've
Well, I'll
hired
let
5
Doris
new
answer that.
psychologists, 2 in the superintendent's budget, 3 more in Dottie's motion that was approved. So 5 new psychologists. What they're doing is they're evaluating everybody, whether they're workforce ready, whether you have the right behaviors and attitudes, and if not, they're going to help you correct them with social emotional learning. We're not doing academics. We're
not the-
adjusting people's way of thinking.
If you look at our academic scores, they're sadly underperforming. And now I'm being very kind when I say that. So the math is in the 20s and 30s. The reading and writing is percentile, and the reading and the writing are in the 50s. Nobody's upset about that. I don't know why anybody's upset.
Well, we did.
Excuse me, Carl, but what they talk about is, there's growth. Each student has growth. So they're better year over year, or from the beginning of the year, or from one academic semester to the next. But the scores are the standard of the industry. We're nowhere near where we ought to be.
The
dropped. State is nowhere near where it's supposed to be.
Right.
We're on par with the state. To me, that's still unacceptable.
Right.
Since Common Core came in, our test scores have dropped.
Right.
Now, if we're doing data-driven decision making, we should go back to what we were doing before, because whatever we're doing now isn't working.
Yeah.
But we never reverse course.
No improvement. There's no.
Well, have you ever remember 3 or 4 years ago when we got a report back from the Nashua Community College of how many of our students were taking remedial classes? And now I understand they don't even call them remedial classes anymore, but is there any idea how many?
We've
had no feedback on that. I remember requesting for it, and I said, wait until the new superintendent gets in, and it was never followed up on. I mean, that should be I think the major thing. How many people are getting into college? How many people are succeeding in college? How many? So we're around, 44% of our kids, is it? Around half?
Free and reduced lunch?
No, go into college. But we don't really know how many graduate.
Well.
In other words, the entrance is
Don't
we get
worry,
a bunch there.
they will track it.
You were talking about tracking too.
There's a couple of bills
everything
in
that's
Concord.
tracking, but you can't see it. But the kids' names are on these.
It used to be that they had a identifier,
right?
So to keep their names out of the database.
Right.
But I think there's bills in there to put them back in, and to not aggregate the data and keep it depersonalized. So I don't understand why they need to do that unless they're tracking our students.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll have a program where based on your learning, you need to go into this profession because this is workforce training. So they'll help you decide where you're allowed to go. I mean, like Europe, isn't that what we're?
Communist country.
Well,
yeah,
Europe
I was just
going to
say China does that very
well.
well.
I'll tell you a story. I was in China with my mother. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we were in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And there's a little park in Shanghai in the old British colonial corner where the last emperor was shot. And the park, you go to the park to speak and practice your English. So my mom and I were there. It's right on the water, the Yangtze River. And we ended up speaking to this young woman who was there. So she said that. It's like she was on her way to her job. She had to leave her family, her children. And she said, you either study for the test and you pass this test and you go to university, or you're in some kind of vocational program, or you're back in the fields.
Right.
And that's how they do it in China. And this is, you know, it's reminiscent of that experience. Now, in China, those kids are in school about 10 or 12 hours a day.
Right, right, yeah.
They have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at school, and they sleep,
And
they nap in the
sometimes
afternoon.
work on Saturdays, too.
And the class sizes are about 70 kids.
Yeah.
I was working last year, I was working with some teachers from China. I coach people in English. So one of our actually parents in the school district who works at UMass Boston had me come down to coach her students. So I got to speak with some of these. They were all middle school teachers and also a bunch of administrators. It's very interesting. But it's really, we're losing the emphasis on academics, and we're more. I think we're going to be probably the best mental health clinic.
Well, you sure?
And not an academic institution anymore.
Because I think that's what one of the problems in China was. A lot of kids were committing suicide when they got in a job they didn't really enjoy, but it's the only thing they had.
That they were slotted to do.
Yeah, the suicide might come in the school before they got to the workforce.
Right.
You know, when you give the kid no options, and it used to be understood. Like I remember elementary school, I had 6 brothers. First 8 years, boys messed up. Boys were boys, and then they pulled out ahead in high school. They just weren't developmentally ready, and nobody worried about it. Boys were just fooling around, and they didn't take it seriously. Girls were more obedient, but they would always pull ahead. But if you demoralize them, and if you track them early on, you're not allowing them, because everybody has their threshold for where they're going to start growing.
Isn't that one reason we have charter schools now, too? Because the people don't allow the kids to grow on their own, or each use their own style of learning.
No, they have homeschooling too for that.
That's true. You've done that
I've
yourself.
done a little bit of that.
So Doris doesn't brag about it.
Yeah.
She has 6 children.
Yeah.
They all 6 went to Ivy League schools. And yet, this is how the board is. Before this current administration, previous, Doris, as a mathematician, was unqualified to rate a K through 6 math curriculum.
Really? Is that
now,
what they said?
2 of her kids, which she hates when I do this, but 2 of her kids got perfect scores on the SATs.
Oh, really?
Okay. So, but she has no clue on how to enable a child's education. It's just unbelievable. You have resources like Doris who've been there, done that, and literally got the T-shirts, right, from all these schools. I'm a professional project manager. They don't want any input from me. You know, and you talk about demoralization. The way the board functions, the way our participation is curtailed, either during asking a question. Oh, one of the guys will go, "Be civil." You know, you get that almost each of his meetings. It's just they demoralize your participation to the point where you really wonder why you're there. Yeah. So, and what I do from that is, okay, if this is how they treat the board, administrators and other board members, well, that filters down to the administrators. That gets down to the teachers, and the kids get it. The kids, you know, one of my motions was to enable the community, everybody, kids, parents, staff members, reach out to the board if there are problems to prevent, without a fear of retaliation or retribution. And those words were in a survey that the teachers wrote the year we arrived in 2016.
Yeah,
There's in 3 different questions in this survey about fear, retribution, and
I can't tell
retaliation.
You how many times a parent, teacher, or student has approached me and wouldn't go public, would not file a complaint. They were afraid of retribution. And then when you bring the concern to the board, they're like, name the person, doesn't exist. If you can't name the person,
if it's not a written complaint, it doesn't exist.
Well, what do they expect somebody to come forward
I'm not
with
coughing.
If
somebody comes to me in confidence, I'll guide them, I'll help them, I'll try to get them to go forward to make a complaint as best they can. And if it's an issue I think that needs to be brought up at the board, I'll do that.
In confidential setting.
One time there was a student in elementary school that was taken out of a class by a psychologist, and the parent was never told. So we did some rules. Like, there ought to be some rules, so parents have some feeling that, you know, they will be notified. And they thought that they could keep analyzing or interviewing or treating the child, whatever they do, for two or three visits without telling the parent. I mean, there's a bill in the legislature to say you shouldn't have a policeman come and interview a child without a parent there.
Sure.
Because they're young, they say things that might not be accurate. So why isn't I mean, what are we doing to our parents? We're just brushing them aside.
Have you had any interaction with the State Board of Education? I mean, the commissioner there used to do homeschooling, so he should be a little bit on your side.
Yeah, he had 7 kids. I look up to him. He did a good job, too.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've done with them, the commissioner tried to do last May, was something he called the general assurances.
Right.
So the intent was the superintendent was asked by the commissioner in a letter on May 30th, could you please make sure everybody understands this 14-page document and explain all the federal funds and their use in the district. So it was due by the end of June. Was it July 15th?
It was a month later.
It was about 6 weeks late. They filed the paperwork saying that those things had occurred. Doris happened to be speaking to the commissioner about something else, and he goes, what did you think about that general assurances thing? And we went back through all the agendas and minutes. We never brought it up. So it turns out the superintendent and the board president filed a false certification with the state Department of Ed over this general assurances. And, oh, no, the board members didn't take it seriously. But what did happen eventually is folks, your federal funds were frozen in Nashua by the state of New Hampshire because we didn't file correctly for a brief period of time. And then they had to certify a second time. And if you look at that paperwork, the superintendent wrote his own certification, which was different from what the Commissioner of Education was requesting. Oh. So the commissioner asked for both pieces, the document and the federal funds. He had the board sign. We didn't sign it. No, he had the board sign, board members sign, just for the general assurances, the document which we did review. We never got the full story. Now, there's some paperwork that gets filed with the state every year. I'm sorry to just kind of hog this, but it's a DOE 25, which lists the 7 or 8 areas of federal funds, which listed $13 million. The superintendent referred to something that was a year before he got here that talked about 6 or 7 million. The thing we got just the other night at the board meeting, at the board budget meeting, $20 million of federal funds. I had no idea. I thought it was around 13 or something. Now it's $20 million. So
that's 9 months late.
It's unbelievable. So,
but at least we got it.
Dottie Oden, I have to say this. So Mrs. Oden, who was board president at the time, because she and the superintendent they each had their own signature sheet on that certification. So Dottie Oden signed that, and when we asked her about it, she said, "Oh yeah, I remember signing that. I signed it without reading it," and that's in the public record, folks. We're not making this up.
Because that's
September 24th, if I'm not mistaken.
That's their blind faith in the administration. They don't have to do any research. They don't need any information. So they put blinders and shut our mouths so we can't look, see, or say anything. So they don't need it, so we don't need it. How do you take your oath seriously?
We don't have a good board of directors there on your board of education.
We're supposed to
We have a few.
Following the law.
There's 2, and Miss Van Twyver is oftentimes voting with us.
And anyway, the voters are the ones just like a company. I mean, the stockholders will vote. Well, the board of on the board of directors, I think the voters
I would
have
encourage
to get
parents to, talk with the teachers, talk with the principals.
Go to some of those meetings.
Come to the board meetings
on TV. They're on TV too.
Oh yeah, we're always televised.
So
and it's on demand even after about
so
3 or 4 days later.
There.
Just like your shows, they record them, and 2 or 3 days later they're
this
online.
This November, if you want the circus to continue, just elect more people like this that just believe that the administration can do no wrong, and that they don't take their job seriously.
So
no, it's apparently not. I mean, there's so many things that are so blatant.
So we're in the middle of our budget cycle right now. So we've had, 4 or 5 meetings. We had a meeting just the other night. Next Thursday at North at
6:30.
6:30 at North in the conference room is a public hearing for the school budget. So we have a total of about $160 some odd million. The operating budget that we're working on is around $109 million. The rest are benefits, federal funds, which, by the way, we never talk about because it's not in the operating budget.
No.
So we don't talk about the $20 million in federal funds and what grants they ask for. We only get to approve them after they've requested and gotten them.
Oh, really?
We're not able to ask and inquire before they're submitted. So let's say you decide you're going to use some of the money to buy technology, laptops, some kind of computer stuff. Well, that's fine, but you now have to maintain that equipment.
Right.
So that puts a burden on the budget,
Right.
but you don't know that
Yeah.
until after we approve, and they'll always take a grant. So
when you apply for a grant, you hardwire in what you're going to purchase it for.
Sure.
So first time we hear of it, oh, the money's in, just sign for the money, and they've already allocated where it goes. You're lucky if you see where it goes. But you certainly don't have a voice in where it belongs.
$20 million now in federal funds. And every one of those grants, and there's a bunch, there's probably a dozen, in different areas, special education,
Title I, Title II.
CTE, Title I, which is...
So you don't have any real say in the communication with the federal government at all.
Oh, no.
And that's
No,
what
we're out of the
the
loop.
commissioner was trying to improve. At least give us knowledge of what's
Right.
going on so we could talk to our administration and maybe adjust what we're doing and gear it for our students to improve
And
situations.
his other reason was to make it easy for the districts to certify in this one instance, and then the feds, when they
Right.
kind of audit or whatever, they would go to that filing so they don't have to bother us again. So that's, his history as a master auditor was his company that he developed. So he was
Yeah.
bringing
Right,
that out
right.
and trying to make it more efficient.
Huh. Well,
Cursive.
Cursive, yeah.
Cursive is fun. Oh, did we mention it already?
did. Yeah, I
we did. I'm
just
said
sorry.
that. You just
English
said that.
language
Getting old and
learners she
feeble.
wanted to
That's
talk
what I
about.
wanted to ask
So
about.
we have a lot of different students coming in with different languages, and the one thing that people don't know is we don't have teachers that know all those languages. We
I mean, there's
teach
over
English.
30 of
60
them,
or
isn't
something.
it?
An English language learner, a
Right.
teacher that does that, doesn't communicate in French or Spanish or Portuguese, communicates in English. So they have to hop on board. It's not like when we learned French in class,
Yeah.
we had a teacher that knew English and helped us with French. It's a lot harder when you have a teacher that teaches English and only speaks English
Right.
for the most part.
Sometimes what they do, when I substitute taught in Nashua,
Yeah.
and it's one of my best experiences, there was a young lady who they assigned another student to kind of pair up with her.
Right.
So the two girls, they go everywhere together. And so that's how they accomplish some of the learning, is they use a student to
Who could
coach
yeah.
another student.
Right.
And I don't know I'm sure those friendships are great and they develop, but still the other second student is carrying a teaching load, in a sense.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that. I've always meant to ask somebody, why don't they take those students and give them an intensive course in English before they even bring them into the classroom?
I think they
That's a
give
good idea.
them 50% of their classes that are supposed to be ELL language classes, and then they put them in different classes that they think they'll be easy for them to handle without knowing the language.
So that could be an industrial arts, like a shop class or some of
Well,
those.
still, I mean, if you don't know what the
Well,
how to
you don't
read,
want to put them in a woodworking thing where they might be using equipment.
well, you don't even want to put them in the kitchen if they
Right,
don't know how to
right.
read.
And it's difficult on a computer. I don't know if they switch languages on the computers when the
Well,
kids
I
use
know
them.
that could be.
When we became a welcoming city and
Yeah.
we took in all these students, did anybody think that we would have these budgetary problems?
Well, we have these things, the budgetary problems, I think, is just a matter of process. That everybody should have a process where everything's analyzed and people
But the
understand
more
what
of those
they're doing.
students you bring in, the more ELL teachers you need. So now we have a dichotomy. Do we get all the ELL teachers, or do we do what our other students need? Like, we took in all those kindergarten teachers. That's like $1 million.
41 teachers were reassigned into kindergarten. But with the way they did it,
They said it was budget neutral.
But the way they did it was they increased the class sizes in 1 through 5. So the holy grail in education is the class size.
Yeah.
Okay, the teacher's contract has provisions. If you go over a certain number, you're paying it's just like a tax. And
Oh, really?
oh yeah, if you go over the number that's allocated in the
Then you
contract,
you
pay
get a
extra per
paycheck.
day.
they get paid extra per day.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll bankrupt you if you're like 1 or 2 kids for the whole year. So they watch that like the hawk, and they do a good job of it. But the thing is, they increased the class sizes in 1 through 5
Yeah.
to not
allow
lay
it
any
to get a
teachers off
teacher.
and move them into kindergarten.
So what you're saying is, the ELL teachers are taking resources from the others. The kindergarten kids are taking resources from the others. So why don't we charge for kindergarten like Merrimack and Bedford and some of these other places do? So if it's going to cost us more and it's impacting, then that money we can go to put the resources back where it belongs for the mandatory instruction.
So I had asked recently, I said, well, can you tell us, let's have a discussion, and I took a stab at it, what's required spending and what's discretionary. The board voted not to have that discussion.
It's too complicated for them.
The chief operating officer, Mr. Donovan, said, well, it'll take me 5 months to figure that out. And another,
Okay.
But we don't have, nobody is clear what the priorities are. Except the superintendent. He says we need ELL. He says we need the psychologists. He wanted to add, was it 24 or 25?
25.
He wanted to add 25 positions in his budget proposal earlier in the beginning.
And they're not all teachers.
Oh, no. There's psychologists. There was an HR director, a grant writer,
He
an
has
interpreter.
a pretty high administration ratio right now.
Well, and we have decreasing student enrollments.
Yeah.
If we didn't add the 740 or whatever number kids
730,000 he cut by cutting most of the 25 students because he was trying to get it back.
Teachers. 75
Teachers, yeah.
professionals, let's call them. They weren't all
Right.
teachers. An HR director, a grant writer, a translator, all these.
Yeah, but that's all overhead.
That's all overhead, not classroom direct.
Right,
Some of it
right.
is with paras, and we appreciate our paras. They get paid relatively little. They only earn about $15,000 a
And
year.
another thing they never question is one teacher stood up and she said that I'm a 5th grade teacher. I have 24 students. Teaching them reading, I have kindergarten level students and 8th grade. So she has the whole shebang.
Right.
And that's why she didn't have enough time to teach cursive, because she's juggling. And I agree with her. She shouldn't be juggling so much.
Right.
Why can't we do something to take some of that load? We're not allowed to get into that.
When the superintendent first got in, he came in July, and it was around December, that first 6 months into it, he arbitrarily disconnected, what's the word? He
All right.
turned off we have badges that you swipe to get into buildings. He cut off our access
Disabled
to the
them,
building.
yeah.
Why?
I don't know. He decided to do it. There was no complaint.
Security.
The board, there was no data saying that we were
Oh,
going
you
in
weren't
there.
trustworthy?
But in the superintendent's eyes, absolutely.
Security.
Yeah. So we used to be invited to come to the classrooms and read. All that stuff has stopped.
Used to be you could go to a principal and say, I'd like to see a math class. Can you set me up? You're fine. You cannot go in there. We had one time we were allowed in, and we tried to change the date with the principal because we had a conflict. Oh, did we get in trouble because we should have gone to the superintendent. Everything's through the superintendent.
Not only that, we had an assistant superintendent meet us there, and we were
Follow
talk
us.
about communist China again. We had a minder. She tagged along. She followed. She interjected herself in the conversation. Interrupted.
How do you get a candid response from a teacher
Sure.
when
Who has
their
the-
evaluator, their boss, is following you around the building?
And the look on that, and he was at the time he's now in another school as an administrator, but he was really just filling in, and you could see the look of fear in his face every time he asked a question. And I happen to have known this guy because I knew him when I used to be a sub for him, and
I see.
I won't say who he was or what he taught. So I knew him personally. I subbed for him quite a bit over the course of a couple of
Sure.
years. So we had a rapport, but the look on his face was nothing less than fear. He was scared about what to say.
Sheesh.
The intimidation is rampant.
Yeah,
Mm.
And that's why they try to intimidate us. It works.
it works.
Well, other than getting a whole new board, which I don't see how
Five.
You
that
need
happens.
five. Five are
more.
up for election this year.
Five seats are
The
opening
majority
up,
is up for
Okay.
election.
and there's 9 members. So this year you can flip the board back, or you can get more of the same. It's up to the voters.
Uh-huh.
So please, come to the board meetings. Watch them at home if you can't come in.
Yeah,
Learn
let's
what's
do
going
the-
on.
Yeah, let's find out, see how they treat you. I mean, it sounds like you're, I don't know, terrorist to them or something.
That's probably accurate.
I mean, he's called the police on Howard.
Yeah.
He's called the police on me. He's called the
George
police
Farrington.
on the former board president. He calls
Well,
the
he's
police on
suing
him.
them now for what.
Yeah,
That's
that was
in media.
announced. It went to mediation,
Yeah.
so
Oh.
we're waiting to hear.
Oh, what's
there might
gonna
be
happen?
something soon. We don't
Oh,
know
all
We,
right.
exactly.
we
when.
think it should be
Well,
soon.
what happened with that incident? He went there.
He
and,
went to pick up a right to know request.
Yeah.
He picked it up and he said, "Can I go back and say goodbye to a teacher who was retiring?" It was during lunch. They had a break. He was given permission. He went to do that. The superintendent found him in the building, went berserk. And this is the second time that's happened. The previous year, he did the same thing. He was the board president at the time, and he kicked him out. This time, he was the former board president. He not only kicked him out, he called the police.
He wanted him arrested.
Really?
The police say I
He
can't
was
arrest him.
frustrated that the police didn't arrest
So what the
him.
police did was they issued a no trespass order,
Do not return to this building for a year.
and then that Mr. Farrington sued the city, and that's what is in mediation
Okay.
right now.
All
So he
right.
sued the city and the school district
Ah.
for $1.5 million.
Yeah,
So
that's
we're
nice.
waiting to hear what happened.
Well, you got all that funds that you have are frozen or whatever.
Well,
No, that money can't
that was
go to
released
anything.
right
That's-
away, and it's
oh,
all
it was?
dedicated.
The
yeah.
problem with
yeah.
that is if you freeze that money, any of the teachers hired under that, they don't get paid because you can't use operating funds.
Oh,
You have
right.
to
Yeah.
use- so,
Sure.
yeah, they're allocated those funds.
Oh, okay. Real quick.
Yeah.
So they had to recover from that little incident.
It was only about a week or 10 days
Oh,
that
okay.
it was a principled delay. They should have, in my opinion, we didn't file the correct second.
Right.
So, but that hasn't been dealt with by the state.
We didn't find the numbers of what money was actually coming to our district.
And now we learn it's 20. Sorry, folks, with the microphone. And now we see how animated I get about this stuff. I care. So,
yeah.
but now we know it's close to $20 million federal money.
that he wasn't giving us
We never
any
got that.
knowledge about.
And that was from a report from last year, because the current one's not out yet. So they just keep you a year late and $7 million short. Yeah, it's because that's like money that they can play with and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Because they don't reveal it to the board. They don't ask for our approval before they approve. So they apply, they do. And, oh, you don't have to worry about that. That's not in the operating budget. Well, there's $35 million that the city pays for all the benefits. That's not in our budget either. But we care about it. So when we hire somebody, so in the superintendent's proposal, to add 25 professionals, some teachers, lots of overhead, $700
It was like $730,000.
as a liability to the city. So when we add people, there's an instant
Sure,
liability
sure.
to the city. And they freaked out
It's
last
usually
year, and they just
a third of that is in benefits, so it's
Yeah.
probably closer to $1 million.
That's what they're afraid of right now is the increase in the benefit
Right.
package.
right.
So when they're asking for 25 more people, and,
Yes.
and you're having a decreasing number of
Enrollments.
students.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't sound
And the
like
trend
there's
is
a very good
that way
management.
for a long time.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem is this fear of retribution.
Right, sure.
If people can't speak up to say, this is wrong, I need to, let's constructively find a solution, things can never improve.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Board members are being intimidated, parents, teachers, students. This is like a lockdown. This is not healthy for any organization.
And data requests, I can't tell you how many times I'm cut off. When I have, you raise your hand,
sure.
you get called on, and I'm asking a question or making a statement, I get cut off all the time. They do not want my voice. It's to the point now where if I make a motion for something, like empowering our students to get the election, follow the law, they just vote against it. Doesn't really matter what it is.
Well, I really liked when the clerk said last time, the board should go out and research social emotional learning on their own, knowing that the administration has no intention of ever giving us
Right, and he
a
say on
depth
it-
presentation.
yeah.
I mean, 20% of one of the federal grants was for professional development on social emotional learning and the implementation. So now we have a pilot in our district. The board doesn't know what it is. The board hasn't approved it. Backwards?
Yeah.
And so the clerk is saying, well, since we don't know what it is, I'm recommending all the board members go out and research it on their own.
Well,
How
the
can
thing
you do
about the
that?
social,
Why not? There's the leadership that's at.
It's backwards.
Yeah.
well, they deny knowledge. Because if you don't have information, you don't know the detail, and you can't pursue the information.
Well, why don't you give
you're
them
kind of
a-
like a mushroom,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
if you
I
know
have
what that
one
is.
other area of that I was curious about. Does the school administration handle some of this administration that goes on for people who haven't graduated this class at
The adult ed program,
I don't know what it's called. but-
Clearway.
They
What
can
do you-
stay till they're 21.
No, I know
They can
yeah,
keep-
but
keep
there's
trying.
an educational thing at night and on weekends that takes adults.
Yeah, it's an
whole
adult
ed-
education program.
Yeah, is that part of your
They have
responsibility?
it at North and South. It's part of the district.
Because I know
yes.
as a representative, I used to get letters of the people who graduated.
Lori Rothaus, a former principal, who now works for us part-time because she's retired. She's done a great job. She expanded the program
Yeah,
from one
it
high
did
school.
look like
so
it.
now they're,
Yeah.
so that what they did is they put programs in, I think it's on Monday nights at South,
Yeah.
where they have daycare for the
Right.
kids who, or parents that might need daycare so they can go to
Oh,
school.
really?
So
That's
she's,
nice.
and the enrollments are up, their graduation rates are up.
Well, I noticed they
been
increased the
really-
number of people that wrote letters, which I
Yeah.
really favored. But I was always wondering why they couldn't use that for the students who English was a second language, to give them an intense
I guess
language.
it's busing. They'd have to pick them up, whereas the night
No, the
adults,
parents would have to bring them in.
the night students come on their own.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, they assume that they cannot get to the school on their own. They have to be bused in.
And then you have the cost of teachers. They volunteer, but I think they get paid like an hourly fee to do
Yeah,
that.
but I was just thinking if you have something open, and the ones that really want to learn would go there. The ones who want to learn English quickly would go there if it's just open.
Right, if they're allowed to
Yeah,
take the
yeah.
course.
And
Yeah.
you'd have to have teachers willing to do
Right,
it.
right,
so.
right. In fact, I'd rather get pay some of those teachers a little overtime for teaching something.
So
like
when they
that.
tutor and do things like that, I think the contract rate is $25 an hour. That's what they
Whatever.
get. No, I mean, I'm
it's
just
a-
stating
yeah,
what it
yeah,
is.
If
yeah.
I was to do
It's
it,
not
I
that-
would pool them all to one
Right,
school,
right.
and I'd have an immersion, like you do for a foreign language. You have an immersive program where they just make sure and as soon as they understand the language, then they go out and take classes.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, that would be.
That's right.
But that would be a lot of different.
That's
age levels.
micromanaging when we make suggestions like that.
Right.
They don't like that.
No,
They don't like that.
They don't like it.
Well,
Not
they-
at all.
they ought to
I've been
discuss that.
accused of micromanaging many times.
Well, that's part of the job of any board of directors.
Well, thank you, Carl. I know, you've
I had
had
to-
your own company and you had to
Right.
deal with that. But they don't want that feedback
That's
at
what
the
they do
board
for
level.
high school kids. If they want to take a little jump, they can either go abroad for an immersive program, or like in North Carolina, they had universities that would take high school kids, and they would go for all the different language, and they'd cook in that, that culture. They'd get to
Yeah.
know. It was totally immersion. So if it works for our kids learning
Mm-hmm.
other languages, it should work. But we don't apply those are best practices.
Oh, speaking about best practices.
Yes,
So
right.
one of the things, if they're going to watch this, they'll know what I'm going to do at the budget meeting. I'm going to ask for some money,
Yeah.
about maybe $2,500, so that we can get some materials from an organization that does best practices in school district budgeting.
Oh,
It's $30 a book, so I want to get maybe 50 books for the
Yeah.
board and the other administrators, so we could begin to implement best practices in budgeting. I predict on your show, it's Friday, March 8th at 3:44 p.m., that the board will reject best practices for the budget in the Nashua School District. I will go on the record right now on your show, Carl,
Okay.
and then you can have us come back and you'll see if we're right or not. Just watch the budget meeting, not this week, but it'll be the week after when we have a chance to modify it.
If
Well,
we have a chance.
it's going to be
Yeah,
interesting.
if we have a chance.
Last
If you have a
year, the
chance,
new inexperienced board just decided whatever the superintendent wanted, let's just vote to give it to him.
Now, who prepares the agenda for each of your meetings?
It's supposed to be the board members, the chair of that committee. So the budget committee
Yeah.
last year was Howard, so he would set the agenda,
Right.
and that he would run the meeting. And he put rules. He tried to say that
Tried.
everybody would have questions. If you wanted to question line items, each individual board member, all 9 of us, would have an option to talk about different things to add or subtract. That wasn't allowed. The majority just steamrolled and said, okay, we're just going to slam this through.
They voted against what I was trying to put down for committee rules, if you would, that I said everybody will be heard.
Right.
And they voted against that because they had the majority and they just wanted to slam whatever the
They
superintendent's
didn't want to look
budget
at the
was.
particulars. They didn't want to add or subtract. They just wanted to give
We're
the
done.
superintendent everything he wants.
Which they did. And then it went to the aldermen.
And they cut it.
And we waited until June. So we give it to them at the end of March. We were late into the beginning of April. And then we got it back at the end of June with less than a week for the closure
Yeah,
of the,
sure.
So
for the new budget.
They waited until
they
they had
undid
the
most of the
deadline.
increases for that year.
So I was trying to get them to vote on two budgets.
Yeah.
This is the budget that met the guidelines of the cap.
Right.
And this is what the board is
So
requesting.
you can think
So-
about it in advance.
Sure.
But they didn't want to do that.
Huh.
And that's what I asked this year. I asked the union president. I said, "What if we charge something for that the extra half day, the full from half to full day,
For the kindergarten, she's talking about.
a modest fee, and use that money so we don't have to cut everything out of the budget if we need
Right.
some of these improvements." No, absolutely couldn't do it.
Is
He
that
wouldn't
Keno
support it.
money coming in yet?
It is. It started. It's not quite as much as they had hoped, but it
Yeah.
was only the first year.
Yeah.
So it takes a while for things to get rolling.
Yeah. To get people even
Yeah.
implementing it.
So the second year should be more indicative of what type
Oh, a
of.
third year even.
When I
Yeah.
made my
Takes a
request
while.
about what's required and what's discretionary, kindergarten is not required by state
Right.
law. I know I'll get hate mail. Athletics is not required by state law. Dr. Murataki, who was on the board for about 8 years, I'm channeling Dr. Murataki, and Ms. Twyver did it also. He pointed out it's not required. Now, only 35% of our kids, roughly a third,
Yeah.
participate in athletics. And I don't want to discount the value of athletics. Keep the kids busy, they're not going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And they're exercising and teamwork, there's all good stuff around that. But,
There's user fees now.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And I-
which don't pay enough of the
If-
cost, but we
But
still
if the kids
subsidize
have
it more.
skin in the game, often they work harder. So even if it's a modest fee,
Right.
then they work a little
And
bit
just so
harder.
parents know, if your family is eligible for free and reduced lunch, your student, there is no athletic fee. We waive it completely if you're on free and reduced. So 44 or so % of the students in our district are on free and reduced lunch.
Really?
Yeah.
44?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's an old number. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
what it
but
is now.
it's
a lot.
order of magnitude is
a lot.
is pretty big.
Yeah.
It's pretty big. Well, I hope somehow, last few weeks or whatever it is, or months, I guess it is, before the next election, maybe we can get somebody come in and argue the way you have and give yourself enough of a majority of the board members.
At least to go back to being civil. Last board, we had a split of 5-4. We didn't always agree on things. This time it's like 6-3. So they assume that we don't even have to listen to the three. So there is no conversation. There is no debate. You don't learn from each other. The decisions are just, given right out of the chute. It's not healthy.
Yeah. Well, now you have all aldermen, too, that are all
Yeah.
one organization.
But I don't think they're as uncivil as our board. I mean, they cut down. You're only allowed to speak twice. You could speak. They have timers.
Yeah.
Until you're done. You can't speak for more than 2 minutes on anything. But the administration goes on and on and on. They have presentations.
So they put one rule in, which says, okay, when we get 5 minutes to 9, we have to vote to continue the meeting or not.
Uh-huh.
So that's how the meetings. That's why there's no public or board member comment, because they approach 9 o'clock
That's
and they
it.
say, we're done and we're out of here.
If they don't like what's on the agenda at that
They kill
point,
it,
they
yeah.
kill the rest of the meeting.
Really?
And that includes non-public sessions, anything that's left at the end of a meeting.
And when each board member has the right to put something on the agenda. I can't tell you how many times that I've asked to put it and they don't, or they question me, or they know you shouldn't, and it's like,
Well, I get private. Sorry, folks, with the microphone again. I got from Mrs. Oden. I got private notes in my packet explaining to me why she wasn't going to do this, this, or this. I wanted to bring up Alderman McCarthy was an icon in the city.
Right.
I mean, his commitment to the city, for me, was unparalleled. Okay, and shortly after he passed, I tried to put a motion. I asked that it be put on an agenda, and they never did it, was that we would name our new middle school, because we're probably going to build a middle school, after him. And Mrs. Oden came back and said, well, I think it's premature. I spoke to Rick Dowd, and he thinks it's premature. So we're not even going to put it on the agenda. And then when I bring it up under new business, sometimes we don't even get to new business. So we never even fulfill the you know, our policy says we're going to have all these, there's 27 different things that could be on an agenda. So we don't even get to new business, which is about halfway through the agenda. Because if you have a presentation, they never take less than 45 minutes. But they don't discount that in the time for your meeting. So you're always at the edge. So that's a great way to cut a meeting short, is to have a presentation in the beginning.
And board members don't have input at the beginning. They only have input at the very end.
So we used to try and comment during the superintendent's comment, and we were ruled out of order by Mrs. Oden, who was the chair, that says, you can only ask this is great, you can only ask the superintendent a question about what he only spoke about in this meeting. You cannot speak to him about what he said the previous week, or he might have sent out in an email or whatever. She just limited discussion as to what was said that night. So you couldn't even prepare. I had questions about what he had said at a previous meeting. No, ruled out of order.
You have to wait and spontaneously listen to what he said, and only that can you respond to. It's just one way of censoring, shortening the meeting, cutting down your input, silencing you.
And demoralizing, it really.
And then
again, that projects down to the staff, to the kids, to the parents.
Any information you want, you have to do a right to know. A board member has to put in a right to know to get information?
Oh, so...
It's crazy.
So let's say you want to find out information. So Dr. Mosley would say, I'll add it to the list. Originally, the list was a way to keep track of the requests so they could be, you know, systematically responded to. Well, we had this, they kept adding it to the list, adding to the list, adding to the list. 6 months went by, nothing was done on that list. And, well, the board has to vote on what I am going to respond to. So 6 months later, no.
It's great.
It's great. 6 months later, you wait, and it's unceremoniously
It's totally
wiped out.
unreal. I mean...
Well...
Welcome to our world.
Yes.
And parents, we're trying to make sure, you know, when I consider stuff, I think of the kids first, the parents, and the taxpayers, okay? And it moves based upon what the issue is. But parents, you need to get your own representation together. If it's the PTO, we have not met anybody from the PTO.
Really?
There was only one time when the parents and some of the staff from Mount Pleasant came in.
And they were very successful. They came in with an initiative and a request, and
it was about better ventilation,
yeah.
especially in the second floor of that school building. And if I come on your show the next time, I'll show you what they gave me. They gave me an award. They did. It was a pitchfork, because a golden pitchfork, and it's signed by some of the parents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the staff. Because I said, I'll stand outside with you with the pitchforks and the torches to get your attention. And parents, you're going to have to do that if there's issues that you want to bring forward. But please come to the board meeting. We have public comment in the beginning of every meeting, and that's intended for things that are on the agenda that night. But there's a second intended comment period at the end, which anybody in the community, a parent, a student, anyone can bring forward, a staff member can bring forward a comment or ask a question or whatever. So we do, it's intended that we have two. But so at least you know when to come. But I will say this, if a parent comes in and has something to say in the beginning of the meeting, I think it's fair to say we would offer a motion to what they call suspend the rules and allow someone to speak early. So if you do come and you have something urgent, we will enable that as best we can, and generally the board will allow that.
So people ought to look at, what channel is it on, the TV? And see your... see some of your meetings?
I just get it on my laptop.
99.
Yeah. See, Big Brother is listening here, folks.
All right.
Thank you. to our video people.
So they should listen to those and see how the things go, and you know, just confirm what you
The meetings
said.
themselves are broadcast
Live.
Right.
and then they go online,
Right.
YouTube and 99,
So you can look back,
so
yeah.
you can go back and watch.
You can get the minutes, and in the minutes you'll see links to the audio tapes and the videotapes so that you can watch.
And let your friends and neighbors know that this show is available not only on Channel 96 for a whole week, but also on nationalgop.org website, the whole history of all our People's View type of shows.
Now, we can't say the same for all our board meetings.
Oh, really?
Because they changed vendors or whatever,
Yeah.
and they made no effort to save them and archive them.
Oh.
And I actually have tried to ask for money last budget cycle, a few $1,000s to buy the equipment. It's cheap money. Storage is very cheap, computer storage. And no, they weren't interested in that either. Because I think, you know, not everybody
They
wants
need a
to read
history,
a
yeah.
transcript. They want to see the interaction, the faces.
Well,
And
think about our non-public minutes. The Board of Public Works, they get the draft minutes of the non-public minutes. They look at them and approve them, just like you get draft minutes for your regular board meetings. We never look at the non-public. We seal them. One time I went to the office and I got a copy of them and I said to the board, they are wrong. They are incorrect. We need to modify them. Our attorney, Bolton, told us we don't have to look at them. We don't have to approve them. If they ever get subpoenaed from court to bring those minutes in, there are no minutes. For all practical purposes, nothing was approved. Nothing is official.
they used to be recorded and transcribed by the superintendent's secretary, who's
Well, they are
very well-
transcribed, but they're not recorded. So she does it from somebody's notes,
And
and,
what-
she doesn't.
Oh, I
always-
thought she had a recording that she was.
Sometimes she did. That one she didn't.
Okay.
And so she goes by the notes, and sometimes there were 5 motions in that non-public session, and she got 2 of them. That's what they look for when they subpoena it.
Well, I'd like to thank you for all your time, but we've run out of time. And I hope somebody takes up on some of these things that you suggested. And I hope
Our
that,
contact information is on the school district website, so you can.
Okay.
Email is there, phone is there.
Okay. Good
Thank
enough.
you.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
good to
very
see you
much.
again,
I
Carl.
appreciate that. And we'll probably have you back again.
Oh, sure. We love it.
At least when it's closer to election. And
Yes.
thank you all for listening in.
That's a wrap.
Well.